Hello, we're here. It is episode 147 of Live Drawing. Tonight we're going to be working on Undersea Hero, but we're going to have a friend join us in a little bit who is currently with a live Kickstarter campaign featuring the Tick of Planet Comics. There is a link in the description, but I'm also going to just drop a link here in the chat for anybody to check out. There we go. And then I have one more I have to post it too. I know that this is riveting television, but we have to mute this tab, and then we click here. Okay, good. All right, we can get to work. Obviously, we'll make room for Jeff when he gets here, and yeah, we'll get to work. This is the sketch cover that I finished this past weekend. It was fun. It was a nice little distraction, and it's always nice to get something finished, and it gets my feet moving. I decided to do this like toss hatch texture just for fun. I knew I wasn't going to be coloring it, so I wanted it to have a nice completed feel to it. So that'll either go to one of the Kickstarter backers, or it'll end up being for sale at one of the shows coming up. For those that weren't here before, this is page 56 that we finished a while back, where we introduced the undersea layer. Hey Daniel, good to see you. The spectacular spider crab, Axel, Secret Seal, and Captain Clam, and just kind of like the overall aesthetic of the undersea layer. Obviously, this panel ends with a knock on the door, and then Undersea Hero turns his head to be like, "What is that?" And then he walks down this long hallway that we drew yesterday, and he opens the door, and my God, it's the correlator. What's he doing there? I'm not going to spoil the last line, but you'll see me working on this page, so I figured we've done every other page here, so we might as well do the last new one. And when we finish this, there will be 2 old pages that I have to redo, but then that's it. That's the end of the line art, and we will throw a party on here when we get done. Yeah, time to draw. Yes, absolutely. For some reason, my brush pen doesn't want to work right now, so I'm gonna have to figure out if it's clogged or something. I don't know. That's gonna be annoying me the entire stream tonight. But we'll do the best we can. Up here, there's a lot of very small line art, so we won't be using a ton of brush. Just because I've gotten older, my hands are not very steady, so I have to be judicious with my brush use. Here's my other ruler. It's been that kind of day. I'm guessing my ruler fell out in the cup. Do the best with what we got. We have sign of someone coming in. Let's see. There he is.
And here we are. Look at this. The best 72-bit video that I could muster.
HD for sure.
Correct. How are you, Ian?
I'm doing all right. Today there was a long drive home with a lot of traffic, but I'm happy to be right here. So, how about you?
You know what? The day after launching a campaign, I have to stop myself from just frantically hitting the refresh button. So any excuse to to just do something different is welcome. And in this case, get to spend some time with my good friend Ian in a blank page. So uh, what else could we ask for?
Right. Yes. And you got your big campaign up. We've got a link in the description, and we put it in the chat, so everybody should be able to check it out. Hop on over there, and I won't ramble too much. So give people the elevator pitch.
Well, when I put the campaign together, it always comes together. It takes a very long time, and then it happens very quickly. It's just something that happens all at once, but it takes months to get to that point. Um, and for me, the last thing that I do is I make a video for the campaign, because the idea is that that makes it gives you the better chance of succeeding. Um, it adds this visual element, and it just seems like it's something that you're supposed to do. So I always put it off until the very last minute, but I always have like ideas of what I want to do. And I think the video, it works pretty well. And mostly what it is just me saying, this comic has the tick in it, and then I like turn the video off, and that's pretty much all we're doing in this case. So the pitch for Planet Comics #6 is there's a story that stars the tick in it. So if you like the character, you should check it out. I guess there are plenty of other reasons to back it and check it out as well, but for the most part, there's that kind of big blue headline there that I'm excited about, and I know that Ian, you're familiar with pretty much from the very beginning when it comes to this particular issue. So we could talk about maybe some of our times in Baltimore last year and kind of how it all came to be. But generally speaking, here's Ian's cover, and it's something that we've been working on for quite a while. So thrilled to see that hard work there. Look at that.
Yeah, giant hand cover. Yes, I was very excited about because with Planet Comics being a golden age book, I always think of those classic covers with the villain or a character holding the other characters as they, in the big metaphor uh, for the
Very
big.
Spectre-like for sure.
Yeah.
There's a mystical element to it. Uh,
Yeah, and I did a little bit more of a. I tried to, I'm not Lou Fine. I would.
well, it's back to just me. What happened to Ian? Did his house collapse? Was he sucked into a whirlpool? No one knows. Oh, here he is.
I don't know what happened.
Was that
I,
was that me or was that you, Ian?
it was. I'll always take the blame on this channel.
I
It's
just
not.
took over for a few seconds, and we were basically getting ready to form a search party.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, if the show's better, I can just pop out. But yeah, no, I mean, I tried to give it a little bit of that brushy flair. It's a little bit more strokey than I usually do, but I just wanted to have that golden agey feel to it. And obviously, like over the years, we've worked on the tick many times, and I have a very distinct boot-shaped head that I have gotten. Through the editorial staff for years there now, and yeah, it was a delight to do, and yeah, um, I was just thrilled to see it go live today, and yeah, like you said, it started in Baltimore, and the Baltimore saga, I feel is eventually we'll have to do a blog or something just of the entire thing, but it
There's
was
plenty of stuff to talk about, just the details, I guess. But I think the big thing is that I had a great time, right? So it was a good
absolutely.
experience, and I don't regret anything that happened. So, um, and normally when you go to Baltimore, that's not always the case. But uh, had a fun weekend, setting up a booth. Um, Ben Edlund and the Tick were kind of like the theme for that whole show. So we through various means, some of which perhaps nefarious, we were able to get a spot right next to him, um, and just spend the weekend kind of hanging out, and that was a lot of fun and just kind of very gratifying too. Um, Do you have a copy of the Baltimore book?
I do, yeah. I should have had it handier, but I was able to disappear for a second. But yeah, we put together and co-published this book for Baltimore, which came out at the show, and we did this, we did prints and all kinds of things. It was a, like you said, a very tick-centered thing. They even did the yearbook as the theme, so it was everyone was really excited about the character, and it was a rare chance on the East Coast for people to see Ben, and
They really came out for him too, and that was kind of fun to see. Just um,
they should have paid us extra for line control.
well, they weren't going to do it. The Baltimore folks were really helpful. I felt, especially when you compare it to maybe some of the other experiences that I've had at other different shows. I felt like they were on top of things, and at least they wanted things to go well. You can't always control everything that happens at a show with just a lot of random people, some of whom maybe have different motives than others. But I think overall it was just like a really smooth show. The location we were in was pretty good. Um, you know, we, we had a nice amount of space, and people really showed up for it. So that was a gratifying experience, especially just given some of the other kind of silly experiences that maybe we've had before, just at different shows for different reasons. And I'm being cryptic, I guess, but just to have everything to come together, everything works so smoothly, to be able to get a book out, and to have people come and show up for it, is was just a good experience.
Absolutely, yeah. And when we got there, we were greeted. Like you said, their staff was great. So, but we got to spend a lot of time with Ben, and that may have, in some ways, segued into
That was a direct line. Yes, there was no long road to it. Basically, just asked him if we could use the character for Planet Comics, and I think his question was, "Oh, what kind of story do you want to tell?" And I think my answer was, "Science fiction." And he was like, "Okay," that's basically how it came to be. So, something else have been trying to put together for a while, and something I've wanted to do, not just for the sake of Planet Comics, but just because I like the character, and I enjoy working with him, and just kind of seeing the things he'll get up to, because there's something just very pure about the Tick, and I think that's part of the appeal. It's almost that like nightly approach that he has, um, and getting to see how that works in different scenarios, I think is a real treat. So my hope for this was just like, if I could tell a Tick story, and maybe it'll be the last one I ever tell, but if I get a chance to, what do I want to do in it? And as I was writing it, kind of kept getting adding more pages to it, and kept getting a little bit more complex. And my initial thought was, well, just tell a short story, something that's contained, something that just has kind of the essence of the Tick. And then it just kind of kept growing and growing. And when I was done with it, I thought I could have made this like 120 pages long, but I have no means to to publish that, and that's not really what I had asked for in the first place. Um, but being able to just kind of use them in any regard is a privilege, I think.
So you settled on a 6-volume slipcase graphic novel set.
Well, I mean, eventually I thought, how far can I take this? Like, what if the Tick is just like the main character in Planet Comics now, and I just use him forever and just never give him back? But I thought, having something that's a little bit more self-contained.
I mean, you wouldn't be the first indie book to do that.
And I can think of at least one solid example. So I didn't want to overstay my welcome, I guess, and we'll see if I do or not. But what's really nice about, I mean, just frankly, just Ben Edlund, his willingness to, the fact that, and I don't want to get too kind of gushy about this, but the fact that he's moved on, and he's done a lot of really important uh, things in different forms of entertainment, and but he's still shows up to comic conventions and he still meets people, and he's not, it's not because he needs to. And I feel like he still has a connection with the book too. So being able to talk with him about that, and being able to maybe use the character for a little bit in Planet Comics campaigns live now, it was is a really nice thing, and certainly for something that I'm grateful for. Um,
And you have a Ben Edlund cover.
what do you know? So this is something. You probably feel the same way, Ian, but just such a big fan of not just kind of his storytelling and the overall concept of the tick, but specifically the way that it looks, because it's got this very unique uh, approach to it that is, I feel like, has a very comic book feel to it, but is still different than almost anything else that I've ever seen before. Um, so it kind of fits and it doesn't all at the same time. And one of my life's goals, to be perfectly honest with you, would just be to own some of his original artwork. So I've anytime something pops up online in whatever forum that it does, I usually just kind of watch it slip away. But the cover art showed up, and it was an unpublished piece that he had drawn previously. I managed to grab it, and that the impression that I get is that after, well, from the stories that I've heard, Ben and maybe a few others, maybe Bob Polio from New England Comics, after different iterations of the San Diego Comic Con back in the 80s and the 90s, they would go to different stores in California, different comic shops, and they would do some uh, almost like a publicity tour. So they would stop at different stores, and Ben would draw a bunch of things, and they would sign some books, and they would just kind of promote the tick and the concept. Um, and the impression that I get, I'm not 100% sure, but this might be from one of those stops. So it's a full, not a full figure, but it's like a bust of the tick, but really nicely rendered. I mean, Ben has a lot of very like clean designs, and you could speak to that better than I can, Ian. But
Oh, it's a fully finished drawing, like,
yeah,
especially if you look at the way, like, not, I mean, if Ben wanted to, he could sit down and do finished work if he felt like it now, but
right,
like, it's not the way he typically sketches at a show these days.
right,
So like, you can even look on eBay now and see some of the Baltimore sketches he did, and some of them are great when he had, it was early in the day before he sketched 1,000 in a day, or if he had a little extra time. But like, usually it's just kind of like, and I think he even spoke to this, that it was more like an extended autograph.
yeah, yeah. Very few lines. Most of them are connected, even, um, but it has that kind of indelible image of the tick. And this is something a little bit, it's beyond that. Um, where it's just fully finished drawing of it. So we're able to, with Ian's help, we're able to clean it up a little bit. It was colored by Jose Villaruba, which I was excited about. Um,
Yeah, he did. He's done tons of stuff for like Image and Marvel and Dark Horse, and he's done, and he does the all the, what is it, the archive editions. He restores those, I think.
yeah, I mean he's involved in a lot of different things. So he's
Yeah.
uh, coloring a book, and this is another plug, I guess. He's coloring a book called "This Ink Runs Cold" by Scott Morse, and he put out a call for just like one-page stories that all have just kind of a basic theme to it. And through that, I was able to meet Jose, and because of that, I was able to get him to. It was a number of things, because I had met him through this, and because I paid him some money to do it. He was able to color this cover for us as well. So I, think it looks great. So I'm really happy about that. Plus, it was kind of my workaround um, to owning a Ben Edlund cover. Uh,
You do. You have it. Well, and one of the things you talk about with his uniqueness that I always think about when I think about, I mean, and it's partly with him leaving, like he never had to or wanted to draw like anyone else. So like he got to maintain his author voice in his drawing. Like at no time were they like, "Hey, we want you to do the Bruce Timm Batman."
Right.
Um, so like he got to stay as this like in this little like ecosystem all of his own, and I think that he talked a little bit about that when he reflected on the at Isaiah's event when he reflected on drawing all the millions of storyboards for the cartoon show. He was
Yeah.
like, I had to draw so fast, like, but even if they asked me to draw like somebody else, it would still look like he drew it.
I mean, he kind of even went one step further, where not only has he been able to kind of maintain uh, that kind of artistic signature that he has, he even got other people to draw like him. So that's a hallmark, I think, of a great artist,
Yeah.
and certainly a successful artist too. Uh, if you look at any of the number, and this is a question I should ask him at some point, I suppose, but uh, if you look at all of the merchandise for the Tick that came out in the '90s surrounding the cartoon. What I want to know is like what was his level of involvement with that, and how much of it was just him saying like, "Fine, I'll draw it." I have a copy of the board game,
Oh, the
Hip,
board game. Yeah.
Hip Deep in Evil, um, and I was looking at it because I moved it from one room to the other just recently, and I look at it and I think this is probably actually his artwork, like
It
especially.
is. He's talked about it. Yeah.
Okay, good. Just because it seems to have that. Like there are plenty of other, like on the toy packaging, you'll see the characters, and it's like this is probably a studio that did this, which makes a ton of sense. And I would think in most cases that's the way that it would go. That's why so many different artists can draw, like Matt Groening. He doesn't do the storyboards for The Simpsons anymore, I would imagine. Um, but when you get to a certain point, I guess you have different people who are trained to draw like you, and I just think uh, that's a very kind of interesting thing and very cool. But I also think, like, I wonder how it makes you think about your own identity, and it's almost because the way that you draw is almost like your signature, right? I mean, it's unique to you, and then to have other folks who come along and can do the same thing that you do, just with taking a little bit of time and thinking about how to do it. I think that's got to be a kind of a strange experience to see people who draw like you.
Yeah, and at NEC, it's something that they would refer like they'd say, "Hey, look at the first Ben issues," and obviously I draw nothing like Ben, but one of the things I remember the year we were there that the Amazon TV show happened and stuff. For whatever reason, when we finished talking to him and got those books signed, and he came near the booth with the guy that played Ramses, like he was like flipping through my original pages, and he was like, I like how you draw the chin." And I was like, well, if he stamps it okay. And then I
Right? Yeah.
actually, and Bob overheard it, and he looked over, and his eyes were like the size of saucepans. It was like a cartoon inside a cartoon. Um, but like, and other artists had like different takes off of it, and like Gabe draws like Gabe, but you could see when he would reference the Edlin stuff. Same thing with Eli, when he would maybe look back a little bit, and I think everybody would pull some little different thing every now and again. And I know every time I would sit next to him at a show, I would figure out something else that he was doing in a way I'd never thought about before, or different elements of the character that would be used to emote or create motion. Because one of the things that was great about the Baltimore book is that so many of my friends got to draw the Tick for the first time, and they
Sure.
all finally realized how hard it was. Because there's no cape to give you the motion, there's no two-tone suit. It is a single color, and it is skin tight. And like, yes, you have like in the Loomis method, you break it down into shapes, but like, there's no like pattern that can give you forgiveness if you mess up an arm or something. Like, it is out there for all to see. I always felt that way.
I think that there are some anatomical like impossibilities with just his head. And I mean the panel that you have up on the screen right now, I think is you kind of given the Undersea Hero kind of that Dudley Do Right Tick type of chin,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
that only works from certain angles, from at least from my understanding of it. Um, so I'll tell you a different story. One of the covers for this issue is done by my friend from Argentina, Pietro, and uh, you
A
know,
phenomenal
there's a
artist.
there's a like a of course like a language gap a little bit. So we'll write each other over email and hope that the general message gets through. But he's aware of the tick and he's drawn it a couple of times before. But with the cover that he drew, one of the notes that he sent back to me, I think it was for this cover, was it's I'm excited to draw it. It's hard to draw his head, and it's hard to draw it like his head in certain poses because it doesn't really work. Like can't exist, the way that it is, at least not, and not make it look good. So that's one of the challenges that the tick has this like cartoonish. Uh, is almost like a caricature in a lot of ways. Um, and that extends to just the design, I think, as well. So he does these kind of crazy and impossible things where he also kind of looks crazy and impossible in a lot of ways. So I think that's a unique challenge that not a lot of people think about. He just kind of is this kind of captivating figure that you can look at and see, and he looks a certain way, but to actually get him to move in certain ways is challenging for sure.
And Ben, at one point, I had asked him about, because that was one of the reasons why I came up with the boot shape, and that's because I was trying to figure out how to look at a 3D, like think about how Corbin used to make a 3D sculpture, and he would light it different ways and move it around, and I was trying to do that in my head, not making a sculpture. And I had asked him, like, how come when the tick turns his head like this, it looks like this, and when he's look like this, he looks like that? And he just said, that's how I felt like drawing it. And that's
which
such
is
a
which is a perfect answer. I mean, there's really for comics, there's no better answer than that. And I feel like a lot of great artists have had. First of all, I feel like you have to be very comfortable with your style to get to that point. Just to basically say, this is just how it is, and it either works, or either like it or you don't. And I think with his style, it really works in some of that almost like indelible uh, fashion, I suppose.
Yeah, and he would have more things that bent more. Like that was another thing I noticed about his stuff. Like the big long, he would start doing these like outrageously long Venom-esque tongues, and
Sure.
the way he would bend the body even more. Because like it's one of the things I fight myself on is because of how like muscular he is and how I'm trying to nail the anatomy. I'm just like I'll lose some of the elasticity that he needs. So I'll sometimes have to like that's one of the reasons I'll have to start over sometimes.
Well, let's acknowledge for a second that Eli Stone just popped on, and how kind of in how much of, uh, how much debt the tick is in, I guess, for the types of storytelling that exist. One of the things, Eli, I don't know that we've spoken very much before. One of the things I really enjoy about your work and Big Blue Destiny and those comics is just how weird they were. And I think there was a certain weirdness to Ben's work for sure, but I think with Eli's work, it really kind of went in a different direction, but it still wasn't afraid to be weird. And just frankly, I'm stunned that New England Comics was willing to publish it. uh, just thinking about like, hey, this is weird. It's different. It's not. Um,
It's not
Maybe
the Silver Age Legion of Superheroes.
for sure. There's not a lot to compare it to, I guess. Just that it seemed like it was weird for the sake of being weird. And I, for one, and it doesn't even matter if I was like, hey, I get it. It was just like, I get what they were trying to do in this particular sequence. And I really just kind of appreciated that weirdness to it. So I think that at least as far as the comics are concerned, some of the weird stuff that I've tried to do, and when you go kind of through that filtering process, it's hard to determine, does it always make it through just the editorial process and things like that. um I just enjoy the fact that it dares to be stupid, I guess, so to speak. But that's just one of the things I really enjoyed about Eli's work, with the tick. And I've seen some of his more recent work as well, and I feel like he still got it. Like I really, it's you're talking about Gabe's work earlier, and I feel like this is kind of the same thing where um, a lot of Gabe's work has um, it's has the Edlin stamp to it, but it goes off in a slightly different direction. I feel like Eli is just kind of another branch of that, where you can tell what the Edlin influence is, but it does its own thing as well. So
Yeah.
I never did get the Van Burens though. I want I want to put that I want to put that out there. Um, but I think a couple years ago we did a story with um, the defoliator, and this was maybe the weirdest thing that I was able to sneak through, at least visually speaking, where it was just
Allegedly the defoliator.
yes, that's not my name. That's not his name. But that's what people call him. Um, I think that so we created a character basically, and he was kind of like this, almost like a mercenary, maybe a a hired hand, but he just had an axe for a head, so he had like the axe blade, and I thought, he looks stupider than I ever could have hoped for, like this guy who shows up, and I think you added the hat, Ian, as
Well,
as you,
he was a lumberjack, so
yeah,
he had the hat, and then he had or he was posing as a lumberjack at the
yeah.
time. So he had the hat, and then I gave him the flannel shirt.
Yeah, and really broad shoulders, and it was like, how does this person? Because I mean, people have always questioned, like, how does Chairface Chippendale, like, what kind of, you know, kind of mutation is this? Like, what? And how do people like speak to him, like, and not run terrified down the streets? Um,
Like, is he an axe in a suit? Is he like, or is there more axe below the shirt? No one
how
knows.
far does the handle go down? Like,
Exactly.
I could even imagine like someone with the head of an axe blade on a neck. This person's unfortunate mutation, um, deformation, maybe, not only gave him the axe blade for the head, but it also gave him the handle for his neck as well. And I just feel like having those two things combined, that's a one in a million type thing.
Yeah, in Borneo Reborn.
Correct.
It was a good story. I like that one quite a bit.
So yeah, Borneo takes place in Africa. We had a lumberjack show up with a flannel shirt and a woolen hat. Um, but we needed someone to ruin a natural habitat, and I guess this was the image that we wanted to go with.
And then I gave the boss of the group that he was with the very thin pencil mustache and a what was it, a tiger print vest.
Whatever works. It was colored very nicely.
Oh, well, thank you.
Could you, Ian? Would you be able to put your cover back up, the
Oh, sure.
Planet Comics cover? I wanted to ask you a question about it. Did you specifically? So it seems like maybe the Tick and the Arthur is a little more sinewy in this cover, and like the unknown is Hood, a lot more fine lines. I know that one of the things that you said about Dwayne's work in the past is that he just always uses these like very fine brushes to create the work that he does, and you can articulate this better than I do. And I just wondered, like, what was was there a purposeful difference in the work that you did for this cover? And if so, like, why? Like, was it just kind of like the golden age inspiration that you had? Was it, some of Dwayne's work? Was it, something else that you were just trying at the time?
It was a combination of things. It was knowing that Dwayne was doing the interior, so I was trying to have mine. It's not going to look like Dwayne, but if it didn't look like as big of a departure as my like broader lines normally do, and then the other element being is that this is drawn gigantic. Like this is one of my bigger drawings I've done in a while, and it's what is it, like 14 by 20, I think,
Awesome.
and it's edge to edge. And it's because like I was doing the math of the magazine size, and when I drew that out on an 11 by 17, it was basically print size. So I was like, you know, I got a bigger piece of paper, and part of that was what's going on here. Someone else coming in who got invited. Oh. But yeah, and I wanted to do giant hand, dynamic poses, because that's again, I always I talk about Dwayne's version of Arthur all the time because I think that he does a great Arthur because it's like this. He's got the cartoony elasticity to the face and just this great, wonderful like gregarious body language while still being meek and timid and scared all the time. And it's just it's a wonderful like version of the character, and and I see, to me, like I look at the different versions of Arthur that have been out there over the years, and I see the line from Ben to Eli to Dwayne, and I see, maybe a little bit of others in there, but like those are the three, like boom boom boom. Or when I look at how Arthur acts and moves, and my Arthur doesn't look like that. I try to just make him, like your doughy office friend. But
Sure.
but he does push-ups apparently. Like he's got the arms and the shoulders, but he skips leg day. um, the one thing that I
I
couldn't
feel
get.
like just flying in general, and as we know, and not to get off on too much of a tangent, Ian, here, because I do want to hear about your cover. But when Arthur just showed up in the comics, back in the '80s, this original version of him, he was portly for sure, rotund, and then kind of as the series progressed and as the cartoon came on, he slimmed down a little bit to where he still has maybe the kind of almost like a pot belly, um, but a little bit more defined as far as that. And I think that it was you who asked Ben about that at a show, just like why did he slim down a little bit? Because I think the original joke was, here's this big fat guy who flies, which as a joke I think lands. It's very solid.
He
But he
compared it
did.
to the Fantasia, the hippopotamus ballerina.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So, why did Arthur change? And I think Ben's answer was just because it was easier to draw the same way in the cartoon and the comic. Like the cartoon had this certain look to it. Why take the comic visual in that same direction? Because why do two different things? Which is a very simple and kind of brilliant answer. But um,
And he wanted it to look more sidekickish.
sure. Um,
Yeah.
but I feel like from a practical standpoint, if we think about the character arc of Arthur, is that he finds the suit. We don't know how. He gets it at, I think he gets it at a yard sale. I don't know if anyone, if anyone's still watching, they can answer this for me. But I think like he like buys the suit for a couple bucks, and he puts it on, and it's this kind of mysterious thing that they never really answer. There are hints about maybe some of its origins. I assume there's some kind of like mad scientist, behind it at some point. But um, he, puts it on, and he decides he's going, he's going sane in a crazy world, basically. So he decides that he's going to take control over the things that are happening. Puts the suit on, goes to fight crime, meets with the Tick, and they join up. But if he's actually going out there and doing all these things, and he's flying the suit, which in some iterations, the wings kind of flap themselves, and in some iterations they have the handholds where he's flapping them himself. His arms would get relatively. I think he would like his biceps, like if nothing else, they would be well formed. But the lower half of the body is just dangling there, like he's just flying through the air. They're not doing anything. He's not running very much. He's mostly just floating and flapping his arms. So it's very inconsistent throughout the body. So I have no problem with with the musculature that you've decided to give to our guy.
Yeah, and Arthur's been actually the character I felt like I struggled with the most, like of the two. Just because I think you can create the heroic silhouette much easier with the Tick because he's the big, block out the sun guy with his big square. You can use some Kirby dynamics and you can do some things that are very big. But and on the cover with the Dwayne's design of the unknown, I didn't want to reveal too much of it, and I wanted it to exist as like a as much of a design element as like a tease as to this new character. So um, that we don't know anything about as of the cover, and I like when covers tie into the story but don't give too much away. So
Sure.
that's just a thing that I really love, and trying to think if there's anything else to the cover that we can reveal at this moment.
Well, hopefully, I haven't. You've given me a respite from checking, like furiously checking the campaign page, but it's going pretty well. As far as by Planet Comics standards, it's doing all right.
It's
Um,
cooking, and people have messaged me, so hopefully we'll get a few in tonight, and I'm sure over the course of the evening people will back it. But if people can, check it out and share it if they dig it, and that's really
it survives by word of mouth, and again, I'm kind of getting away from my original thought, but with something like this, even I understand, things are terrible right now, just in general with a lot of different things. So, maybe back in the comic isn't something that you're able to do, but it lives or dies just by word of mouth, and just by how many people are able to see it. So it's tough, and we were talking about this just a few minutes ago. How a lot of different platforms have kind of throttled the views or the reach when you put a link in a post or something like that. So
yeah.
the thought is, how do you get around that, or what do you do about it? And um, what's the purpose of social media if you can't promote yourself, just in general? But um, you
Because
know, it,
I'm gonna post a snapshot of the artwork by itself, and I'm not gonna put the link with it. And I can guarantee you, if I were to like screenshot the analytics, it would probably be no less than double.
yeah, and just anecdotally, I think you see it all the time. So that's
Yeah.
you're kind of it's an act of resistance by sharing this link and promoting it and showing it to your friends.
I've seen
Um,
people do different things, but I would post it with saying like, I'll DM you the link or whatever, or DM me for the details or whatever, to try to take it so that it doesn't recognize it as like. I think they're fine as long as you're not getting people off. I think they won't throttle it as much if you're not trying to pull people off the platform. They want,
yeah,
and that makes it like way tougher. But and if any of our friends out there, I know that a bunch of them, people that are here, also have podcasts. They write journal entries, they write blogs, they write all kinds of things. If anybody wants to do that, to help support it, I'm sure Jeff would be happy to have you reach out to him. Dr. Mask, I know I see his name there. I think they do some reviews.
so that's a real person. That's not just an ad that just showed up to sell me soap.
No, I have messaged that person.
Okay, all right,
If it's a bot, then it's a good one.
welcome. Yes, no, as you can tell from this scintillating conversation that I think has lasted about half an hour.
Yeah.
We could, yes, both myself or myself with Ian Chase Nichols, could easily ruin your podcast for you. Just absolutely no question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we could talk about cats. We could talk about any number of things. I don't know. We're going to avoid the world at large. Maybe if there's a comic book that we.
Perfect.
I mean, you've got your 2099 shirt on. We could go into 2099. We could maybe even get a person who worked on 2099 to join us.
Oh my goodness. Look at that be. I think Ian is friends with like 30% of that statement. So, and I'm in heaven for talking about that stuff too. Just oh boy, someone just posted a drawing of Doom 2099 and it got me excited. Um,
Anytime Pat's going to do a show, he posts a new Doom 2099 that somebody has commissioned. So. And I know Joe St. Pierre gets asked to do Spidey 2099 often since the Spider-Verse movies. So
I mean, why wouldn't he just do it all the time? I mean, that should be the only thing that he draws. If I was Joe, I'd be like this way. I'm just gonna pull a John Byrne and continue the series, even though Marvel is publishing a series. Just draw a different one, post it up there, sell the artwork, uh, make out like a bandit.
I think we should just call some of the other Tick people and we'll just make fan comics. That's what we'll do.
And that's what we'll call them. We
Yeah,
won't publish them.
no, just
Uh,
post them online and call them fan comics. Maybe we can finish the trilogy of what happened to Arthur.
we'll do the Tick 102, we will post it there. I know several people's heads who would explode for different reasons, justified and not, if we would do something like that.
I I would be happy to see that.
uh, getting back to your comments on Arthur, one of the things that I just really find fascinating about him, especially when you have such a larger than life character like the Tick, is that you're right. The X-Men, I never really got into the X-Men 2099, but Spidey, Doom, Ghost Rider. Uh, I mean, the Punishers was ridiculous, but I think that it worked. Um, I'm there for it. Spider-Man specifically, but a lot of them were great. I thought,
I
in the
agree with the
context of the
design.
'90s and just what they were trying to do with it. Um,
I
but
agree with the
yeah.
designs on the X-Men, but I did like the premise, the idea that none of them had ever met one, and they were trying to live up to it. But yeah, you're right. Bloodwing and Zion and Legacy and Metalhead and
Junkyard.
Junkyard. There you go.
Um,
But the Fantastic Four was more or less just more Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four was just like, we're out of ideas at this point. I really enjoyed the Fantastic Four 2099 book. Uh, it I think it only lasted 8 issues. Of course, I've got them all, but um, pretty soon after that book launched is when the whole line went under. Marvel fired the editor, and then all of the creators walked, which is this great moment of solidarity. I feel like, just from an industry standpoint. Um, but the FF book was like the current Fantastic Four basically just shows up, and they don't have a lot of memory, so it's very kind of tied into like Doom 2099 story where he just shows up. He's not sure how he got there, but he's gonna continue to be Doctor Doom. Um, and it was this question of like, who are they and where did they come from, and are they the real Fantastic Four? And that lasted for I want to say like 6 issues or maybe 5 issues, and then the kind of the line went under, and then it just became like, who knows? Let's just throw them into space. They're going to Mars. Uh, but yeah, the costumes were very similar. This same color scheme. They moved the four over to the side of the chest, which actually was reflected. I think. I wonder if that had something to do with the movie design from 2005.
Oh yeah.
But just kind of just slight variations on just the traditional costumes. I mean, the Thing just had the shorts, so I don't think his were different at all. His costume, um,
You had
but
some John Buscema artwork.
we're just getting off track all over the place. But one of the things that I think is fantastic, just um, really interesting about the 2099 line. It was this like convergence between all these kind of like up and coming artists and all the artists that had been around for decades but weren't getting any work anymore just because their art wasn't extreme enough. So you saw like Gene Cologne did a few issues, I think, of Doom 2099. Um, there was a Joe Kubert cover to, I want to say 2099 Unlimited. Um,
I
John
saw that.
Buscema did
Yeah.
did several titles, including an issue of the Fantastic Four. So you had these like huge, just influential artists at the time, and they were doing like an issue of Ghost Rider, and not just like they weren't on the series or anything like that. It was just like, hey, this guy is he missed his deadline, so we need someone to come and fill in for an issue. Call Joe Kubert up. I guess he's good for it. So kind of crazy in that regard. I mean, you think that I think I told you this story before, Ian, but one of the things that I recently learned, this was at least heavily implied. There's a graphic novel called, I think it's called I Am Stan, and Tom Scioli created it, Pittsburgh guy. And it's more or less a biography about Stan's life, and of course it talks about his time at Marvel quite a bit. And they have like 2 pages that are dedicated to the 2099 line, which is crazy. But they taught, so how much of the story, I feel like the story, it feels accurate. I haven't checked all the sources and things like that, but we're talking about private conversations and things, so I'm sure there's some artistic license. But in this book, they talk about Ravage 2099, which Lee was a co-creator on. I'm not sure how much he ended up actually writing himself, or if he just did a synopsis. Probably did in the Marvel style, I guess. But originally, that book was supposed to be between Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, uh, and to think, like, if this had happened, like the two collaborations that Lee and Ditko would have done in their lives would have been Spider-Man and Ravage 2099. And it's just like the disparity of that is just kind of blows my mind when I think about it would have been 30 years apart, the very different points of their careers. Um, just and the quality of the book would have been a lot different too.
The
Uh,
hot off the heels of his run on Speedball,
that's
Mr.
true.
Mr. Ditko.
For all the things that we hear about Steve Ditko, and kind of how he took this principled stand on Spider-Man and left the book because he didn't agree with the direction, or maybe his involvement, or the credit that he was getting for it. He did do a lot of weird stuff at Marvel up until like the early '90s, I want to say. Um, so it's interesting to kind of think about just his legacy and the things that he did, and just what we know about kind of his personal life.
He did the
And
Chuck Norris Karate Commandos. He did
Yeah, and the fact that he was still willing to do the
the
odd issue
Phantom.
of, like the Marvel Holiday Special.
Yeah, the Phantom 2040 series. There was like 3 or 4 issues that Bill Reinhold inked, and I remember reading an interview with Bill, and he had basically said that, like, at that time Ditko was basically providing layouts, and Rich Buckler told me the same thing about Ditko's time at Red Circle or Archie, and basically Reinhold did a similar thing that P. Craig Russell did on Rom Space Knight, which is he dug out his old Ditko comics, and when he would see something that kind of looked like an old Ditko face, he would try to make it look like the old Ditko face, rather
Sure.
than just drawing it his way on top of it. And I mean, those Phantom comics are generally like heralded as being like worth it for the art. I mean, at least, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and that, I don't know, the different collaborations when you have when you have a famous artist, and someone who's kind of doing pulling doing a lot of the work, frankly, for a lot of the books. I think about this is not the same. This is not a one-to-one comparison, but I think about when Jack Kirby went to DC Comics, and he was doing Jimmy Olsen's Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and he would draw that in his style, and then they'd get Kurt Swan or someone else to come in and draw like Superman's face over top of it. And again, not the comparisons are the same, but stuff like that and just the stories behind them, I always find very fascinating, because first of all, if you've lured Kirby away from Marvel Comics, if you've supposedly given him free reign on these weird titles that he can do pretty much what he wants with it, if it's Jack Kirby, why aren't you letting Jack Kirby draw Superman the way Jack Kirby draws Superman? Why replace his face with someone else? Why have Jack Kirby on it in the first place then? If that was your intention, Kurt Swan could have done 10 books a month apparently. So, why not give him that one too? If this is how you're going to do this. So, I get the impression, and certainly I didn't know him, uh, but I get the impression that Jack was probably just like, fine, I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, it was Mike Royer was at the Little Giants comic show, and he's a guest there regularly. And I didn't get to talk with him much this last time, but the year before, I brought like an issue of Devil Dinosaur and an issue of Machine Man for him to ink, and for him to sign, and he was the inker slash letterer on all those. And it's very interesting because you talk about all the different collaborators, and you know I. I love the inking on those books, but I even more so love the lettering and the graphic design, because I always
Sure.
felt that he just did such a wonderful job creating like a fitting internal logic with the lettering too, because it doesn't. His stuff didn't look like lettering was sitting on top of the artwork. It looked like it flowed with the artwork, and that's the biggest compliment I think you can give a collaborative effort between letterer and artist, is that it looks seamless. And I don't know. He's had so many collaborators and he churned out so many pages. I mean, you're probably right. At a certain point, he was probably like, "Yeah, do whatever you want. I'm going to do my thing over here on Orion and do my own thing." And I've got New Gods. I've got Forever People. I've got these issues of First Issue Special that I'm going to do just cause. Um, um, and I think early on, the first one was, I don't know if it was the first issue of Jimmy Olsen or the second one where Neil Adams redrew the head on the cover.
Sure.
And I remember seeing that one, and they probably were like, "Wow, this looks great. We can do this on all the heads," failing to realize that it looked great because it was Neil and Jack instead of, like, no offense to Mr. Swan, but at the time Neil was the premier artist in the industry, arguably, because he was changing the game.
And then their styles are very different. Just,
Yeah.
I don't know that, Kirby and Swan, I think, are classic in their own rights, but I don't think their styles are necessarily very compatible. At least, especially like 70s Kirby. Um, but what do I know? I guess this is just my speculation, I suppose. And you know how much of a fan of Kurt Swan I am.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
massive. And it's, I'm not taking anything away from Kurt. It's just it was, there's an anecdote from one of the Alex Toth documentaries that came with the cartoon series. I think it was with Space Ghost. It's either Space Ghost or anyway, it's one of the cartoons that he worked on. And he basically, one of the people that knew him tells this story of Alex Toth meeting Jack Kirby at Jack and Roz's home in California, and they basically sat down and told each other how they make comics, and they both walked away not knowing at all what the other person had just told them. So
so one of the things that I find interesting about Arthur, we're going to get back to this, is that both like conceptually and also visually, he's kind of this uh, bridge between the two worlds that exist in the tick in the world of the tick, where he's kind of the in between like normalcy and absurdity. And I feel like his design reflects that as well. And I think one of the interesting things, I don't know if you can speak to this just about drawing the book, is when you have the tick, who's this like super over the top cartoonish character, and then you have like the world of the city, which by and large is regular, it's like the real world, with several notable exceptions. And then you have someone like Arthur, who just is kind of in between that, and is kind of pulled in both directions. And he almost, for me anyway, when I write the stories, is almost a focal point, because I feel like that's one of the most interesting things about the tick and about the story itself, is just you have this one central character who doesn't belong in either world. And I think part of Arthur's progression, just in general, is he kind of moves toward the absurdity and he embraces it more, and it's less, he's less afraid of um, of what can go wrong, I guess. And he just kind of accepts his new role. It's like who he is. He never takes the suit off, just like the tick doesn't anymore. We never see his face. So I'm curious, when it comes to drawing it, does that ever play into some of the things that you do, like thinking about, the tick is this larger than life character. Arthur, has a moth suit on and he flies and he does these weird things, but at the same time, he's an accountant, right? So, like, how do you find a good mix between those two things?
well, I think you addressed one of the things that I think I struggled with early on, was like the world in which they live, and in the, specifically speaking of its long tenured publisher NEC's like version of the city, like is it today or is it a fantasy not today?
Sure.
And that was a question I would ask a lot, And, some of the variances you've seen over the years is like, I think Sean tried to push it towards today, especially towards his later issues, like the last convention special. I think he really tried to make it more at that time of being then. And, is it almost a 90s period piece? Like, is it always 1994? And then there was one story that we did where we finally saw a cell phone. And I actually don't know if that was the first, like you put a cell phone in one of Dwayne's stories, I think. And
It was one of the first. It was
yeah,
the first story that I wrote as kind of like my tryout type thing. It wasn't the first one that got published, but the Tick and Arthur are basically at the library, and the Tick doesn't understand how the internet works. And Arthur's saying like, I've got the internet on my phone, and the Tick is like, you have a phone, uh, and that was such a funny idea to me. But like looking back at it, I think like just the anachronism that maybe implies. It feels like the Tick, works within this 30 maybe year old time frame that almost has like a timeless feel to it. So the use of cell phones in in the comic is has been a point of contention for me anyway, even though I've used it before. Uh, but yeah, it's this kind of question of like, what is the city and what is the world that they live in? Is it this? Is it reality or not? Even if we're not talking about like literally, uh, does the Tick exist outside of reality? But cell phones kind of date a period, I guess. Um, and including that in a story is for me anyway always this question that I have. Um, there's a uh, I don't know if it's a blog or something like that that looks at the plots of Columbo, and it asks like, could this have been solved, or is the plot ruined, or could have been solved with the introduction of cell phones? And like half of them are yes. And I and I feel like I think about that uh, when I write the Tick. Like, does the inclusion of these kind of like real elements, does this ruin the story, or should it just be this kind of uh, cartoonist jaunt through an adventure? And it's always a fine line to walk, I guess.
yeah. And is it only used like when it's funny at that point, or is it something that is like a tool, like you said, like how far? Like, is it with the Columbo thing, or I'll see that in movies, or even in stuff now where we were watching just old episodes of the X Files, and it's like if they had a cell phone, the lone gunman never would have been trapped in that air cell. Like, okay, that's
Caitlin, thanks so much for checking for watching the video. I guess I miss you.
thanks, Caitlin.
Um, I think to your point that anytime that I reference anything like that, it almost has to be for a joke. I mean that's why use a cell phone as a plot device when you can just make a joke out of it. And it's almost like, and I'm trying to think of other examples, but just like when using something specific, like there's a reason that you put a focus on it, and with the Tick anyway, it's to make some kind of joke. So anytime that I've introduced phones specifically, it's um, it's just because I wanted it to be a punchline to some degree.
I did one in one of the one story that I would say mostly wrote, um, where he microwaves meatloaf. So there's a microwave. So at least it's you know, and the meatloaf wins the Nobel Prize. It's reheated, and then it wins a gold medal in the Olympics, all in one page. So like the whole idea was the story of this meatloaf really quickly, but it was just I didn't think too much of the microwave at the time, but then like another thing that's like just technology, like you can do the almost like emoji version of like a microphone when he's standing in a microphone, or
Sure.
do you have to make it look like a period microphone? Because they've evolved so much over time, where now microphones that are super powerful are the size of little buttons that you wear on your shirt. Um, you know, and in that case, I wanted to have like the comedic big honking microphone. So like at that time, could that microphone been from 1976? Sure, sure.
I think one of the things, speaking of like microwaves and phones, one of the things that's funny about them is like the domestic quality of them. And I think the specifically thinking about Arthur, I think one of the interesting things about him is that he has this very domestic quality to him, where he's the guy who cleans up, he's the guy who makes dinner. And one of the things I really enjoyed about Edlund's run, both in the cartoon and in the comics, was when they would just like eat together. And like Arthur cuts up his hot dogs into the shape of little octopuses and things like that. And just some of those details I thought were fun as well. So I think a lot of the humor, and again, just looking at Arthur's role and his kind of being torn between two worlds and all this, it's kind of exemplified in things like that, where he still does. I mean, he's an accountant, and we get that, but he probably still does his own taxes too. And that's just a side of superheroing that you don't see very often. That mundane aspect, I think, gives the characters life in ways that it started out anyway as like a parody of other superheroes, and then kind of became something else in a lot of Ben's work specifically. So fascinated by Arthur. And maybe this is just like part of getting into middle age, I guess. Like when I was a kid and I watched the cartoon, I was like, it's the Tick, 100%. This guy was going to burst through windows or burst through walls like the Kool-Aid Man. And now I'm like, I think Arthur's really interesting. And like, would he make a reservation for dinner? Um,
What was the one? There was one joke that you did that I loved when it's the sequence where they're trying to bore the alien off of his chest, and they're painting the ceiling, and then there is a box marked what?
Strings not long enough to keep. which just like any good thing of things that I'm a part of was stolen. It was a real thing, and I think it was my great grandparents who had probably who lived through the Depression, things like that. But I think it was my dad's grandparents. He said when they were cleaning out their house after they passed, they found a box, like a shoebox, and it was labeled strings like not long enough to keep. And it's just like, holy cow, like what there's some kind of brilliance to this that probably also answers the questions of like, why am I the way that I am? um, but I thought Arthur might be one of those guys, right? Like he might see something and be like, I should throw this away, but I might need it sometime.
The string's not long enough to keep. The Jeff version would be 2099 upgraded copies, or like somehow it's like the ones that you've upgraded your copies in your collection in a box.
I'm at an inflection point with my collection just because it's enormous, and for sure, I'm looking through things. I'm like, do I need the good copy, and then the copy that I had when I was 13. And up until now, the answer has always been, yeah, of course, like no question. um, but maybe I'm starting to reconsider that just out of necessity, I guess. But yes, that it hits for sure. For sure. um,
My collection cutback is going to be necessitated by no longer being able to lift long boxes without hurting my back.
uh, I mean, when I moved to the new place, that was part of it. Just like moving all, it's like I'm gonna have to move all these comics, and just kind of realizing what that means. Every week you go and you get more, and you just put them away, and you get a stack that's this big, and that's fine. And then eventually it's like, like I have 100 long boxes here. What am I gonna do with these?
But then you get distracted and you're like, oh, I haven't read this in a while.
And then it's like, oh, I like this one. Yeah, look at it. Flip through it.
Then in my case, I'll show it to Camille and I'll be like, oh, this is that fill in by so and so. And she's like, that's great.
Well, for me, it's like, how do I organize the word doctor? Because the way that it's on the cover is DR, but if you spell it out, it's DO. Like, what's the plan here?
Here's a collection
This year,
question. Are
yeah,
you are do you sort by title alphabetically, regardless of company, or do you sort by company then alphabetically?
I just do alphabetically, and I think that makes sense to my brain, I guess. But also, I think that just from a practical standpoint, um, when you start realizing that there are companies other than just Marvel and DC, you start picking some of those up, and then, hey, some of these are good, and I'm going to follow these ones, and then you also are met with the reality that a lot of those companies, end up, folding after a few years at most. So then you have, stories that bridge companies and go to, different companies. Usagi Yojimbo, for example, which is not a fly-by-night title by any means, but that was self-published. It went to Dark Horse for a while, then IDW had it for a while. So, like, when you have a title like that, I'm not going to split those up.
No, you
You got to
can't.
keep them together.
That's right.
So just doing it alphabetically, straightforward down the line, makes sense to me. Here's a question for you. Any collectors out there, you can chime in. Do you put the numbers before the letters or after them?
I generally put it before.
Yeah, I do it before. I think those
Yeah,
are
I generally put
something
it.
in my brain says numbers are before letters. And maybe it's thinking about like a keyboard where it's located on there. I don't know, but I know plenty of. I've looked at like online databases and the numbers are just at the end, and I'm like, no, why is this there? It doesn't
Yeah.
belong here.
Dr. Mask says he has a Steve Ditko's changing man problem. Whenever he sees them, he buys them, and he has like 6 copies of each.
I've had that problem too, where it's like, I don't care if I have this, I like it, and it's cheap when you find some of those cheap issues, and then you realize, oh, I've got well, yeah, E-Man's another good example of it. But yeah, you realize, well, I've got 4 copies of this, and they're the same thing. One of the rabbit holes I've not fallen down into is distinguishing between like newsstand copies and direct market copies, and like the Mark Jeweler inserts.
No,
Uh,
I do not recognize a different ad as a different comic. I just don't recognize it.
I mean, there are different ways to distinguish. I feel like the content and even the presentation and all of that. But when it comes to like Canadian price variance, nope, I'll never get into it just because uh, that would mean like doubling my collection, and I've got enough problems as it is.
Sometimes I fall into stuff just on accident, and it's not like I'm looking for them. Like one I found in a dollar bin, mind you, was the actual first printing of the French edition of Giant Size X-Men #1.
Okay, all right,
And obviously, this person like
that's neat.
it's an heritage, publication. And it also, the interesting thing about those books is they were compilations. So the other book that it was paired with was actually the first appearance of Nova. The first French appearance of Nova and the X-Men were in this one little book, and they're split up, so they're little chapters. This has all the major first appearances, but it was just one of those things where it's like I would never pay what eBay is telling me to pay for this, but in
Right.
this instance, I was like, this is a neat thing. I'll pick it up, and it was fun. But price variance, ad differences, like, and to a certain extent, like, I don't follow the variant stuff, even though I do variants, and I don't, deny that they're a good collectible and a good source for employment. um,
Sure.
um, but I just tend to buy whichever cover I like, or the whatever one's on top of the stack. I was at the store, and they had the new Batman Hush series, and
Yeah.
they had, at NEC, they had all the covers like lined up, like just way lined out. And for some reason, the blank sketch cover was more, so I didn't pick that up. And the regular cover was like almost $1 less. So I'm like, of course I'm picking this up. And they had like, there were some really nice ones. There was like a Campbell cover. I think there was even was there a Tim Sale cover where they reprinted like an old piece?
I wouldn't surprise me,
Yeah,
especially if Jeff Loeb's writing the
yeah.
series.
But that was one where they just had a wall of them, and like people were super excited to pick it up. I was there like the first weekend it was out, so it was like people were traveling to a comic book store to purchase this book, and it
Love
was
to see it. Yeah.
yeah, and you know, and that's an instance where I don't generally have a pull list, and the people that are coming to buy it are not ones that have pull lists either. So like on top of whoever's getting them in their pull, like these were just a whole new wave of people, and that's something that like I don't know if people realize like just doesn't happen all that often.
How difficult it is to generate. One of the things that I admire about this series, talking about the Hush sequel, is that they, at least to start out with, they kept it in the regular Batman book. So they didn't. It wasn't like an event comic in itself. What's a new number one? It started in like Batman number 158, I think, or something like that. Um, so just to, I don't think many people could get away with that, but Jim Lee's one of the people who could. Um, One of the things that I didn't pick it up, and I regret it. Maybe I'll try to find it. Is they printed just like this outrageously enormous size version of that first part of the story,
Oh, really?
like 11 by 17.
Oh, wow.
So even bigger than Treasury size. So it's just this huge, like ridiculously huge sized comic. Like, where are you going to put it? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to store it? Are you going to keep it? Are you going to throw it away? Like, what's going to happen with this thing? And those are all the thoughts that I had going through my head when I saw it. And I was like, I don't need that. And then like 6 days later, I was like, I need that. Like, I need the spectacle of it, is what it is.
Do you collect artist editions?
Whew, I'll tell you what, I collect the Fantastic Four artist editions, and even those. I mean, I have like 8 of them.
Oh, wow.
So like they've done a couple Kirby ones. They did a Walt Simonson Fantastic Four one recently. They've done John Byrne uh, with that, and I think that might be it. But who cares where you store it? I guess that's the thought, right? It's comics, like throw them in your attic. Uh, but I'm right there. I'm looking for a copy. Like I actively am. But
I love treasury editions and stuff,
treasury
but like
editions are nice, and they can fit on a shelf, and that's
yeah,
also a
yeah.
nice thing about it too. This, what are you gonna do with it? I don't know. And it's not. There's no spine to it. It's just gonna fall over and bend in half. So I don't know. And then you gotta find like specific special storage for it. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough to keep this forever, which makes me want it even more. I feel like the challenge of it makes me think like, yeah, I should get that.
I've never got you would think that as an artist I'd get into the artist editions, and I think they're beautiful, but
They're lovely,
it
but
really
so
is
impractical.
just yes, it's the storage situation. And I live in an apartment, so it's even like yeah, my closet in my studio is like busting at the seams with
Yep.
just all the comic books. So like they're behind the couch, they're in the closet, they're in a storage unit as well.
Oh boy.
But
I've seen
that's
a lot of, yeah, I've seen a lot of horror stories about storage units, and then I also think like I could get a storage unit, but then that would be like paying to like rent a space for my comics, and then eventually it would just be worthwhile for me to buy those comics one more time. So I would be spending as much in storage as what they actually cost. So then I could just uh, throw them into the ocean, and then in 2 years buy them all again, and it would be in the same place. So I don't know. There are questions, and they feel like uh, there are fairly heavy ones.
yeah, and I'll clarify that that's not all that's in the storage unit. There's like normal life stuff in there. But yeah, that was actually a conclusion I came to when we were prepping for Baltimore. Was it would have actually been cheaper to buy a banner and throw it out at the show than to bring it as an extra thing on a if I had to ship it or whatever like that. And that happened at San Diego a
Yeah,
couple
talking about
years
San
ago.
Diego, right?
Yeah, when it was San Diego a couple of years ago when I was coming out there and I had my Undersea Hero banner that was like, "Oh, I love this. It's great." But it would have cost me less to just print one there and throw it away than to bring it home.
You could have raffled it off, and not charge anything for it. Just be like tickets. And when you buy a book, you get a ticket, and someone has to take it home with him. Uh, a number of years ago, I guess this is probably 2017, talking about the tick and the one year that San Diego went so big on the tick, and that was just a great experience just in general. But there was a company who did like an 8-bit version of like a little figure of the tick. Came in a box about this big, um, and they had plans on doing it. Arthur, and I feel so bad for Griffin, who all he wants is just an Arthur figure, and they'll never make them. Um, lovely, look at that. But
With these
uh,
sandwich edition.
it's very rare. It's that you just don't find those everywhere. Well, I mean, you're missing the fact that there's a Matt Groening sketch directly below.
He was very mad that I was late to that little signing. It was thanks to what's his name, the guy that Jesse. Jesse came by the booth and he's like, "Oh, I have 2 tickets to the Groening signing, and I'm only allowed to use one because they know who I am," or something along those lines. He was like, "You want to go?" And I just picked up my book and ran. And he was like, definitely getting ready to leave. And the lady who was his helper was like, "You were supposed to be here 20 minutes ago," and I literally was telling the truth when I said, "I didn't know that." And he did not want to draw the tick, but he just had Bart saying, "The tick rules, man."
I mean that's pretty good. I mean, all things considered, I feel like
It's not your drawing by Matt Groening, but
woo, we can talk about that. But I feel like just getting anything by Matt Groening uh, is a miracle. Uh, so to be able to see him at Comic-Con and to be able to interact with him, and he has I mean, to pull it all back together, I feel like he and Ben have a lot in common, like just personality wise, certainly talent wise, um, artistically as well. But I feel like one of the great things about someone like Matt Groening at Comic Con is that he doesn't need to be there. He doesn't need to go to the booth. He doesn't need to sign anything, and yet he still shows up and would do a limited signing. I mean, if it would just be open to anyone, the line would be out the door, literally. Um, so at the bongo booth when that existed, and unfortunately it doesn't anymore, they would uh, there were certain ways to get it, but they would do a limited signing where he would sign for 30 or 50 people. And I know I was able to get a ticket one year, and you were able to maybe the same year. Uh, but I mean, heck, I mean that's something. Just I feel like that's very like Shel Silverstein, Dr. Seuss esque when it comes to just his legacy and things like that.
and just as a lifelong Simpsons watcher, it was like, I don't know. I mean, it was a an episode of Antiques Roadshow. I remember a person came on with a bunch of Matt Groening vintage sketches and like his little photocopy books, and they were like, "Oh, how did you get these?" And he was like, "I worked the late shift at the copy store that he used to make these at, and he would just give them to me." And I tend to think of that as like the artist journey, and you think about like he was at a copy store making these little books and didn't know if anyone would read them. And they eventually they evolved and became like the Laughter from Hell books and stuff. And but yeah, it's interesting. And I had a little bit of overlap of that when I first started, because we still had books made at like Kinko's and things, and you'd see people with the magazine size because they didn't want to pay extra to have them trimmed down and things like that. And that's where you saw a lot of those little half fold books that don't fit really in any box.
Right.
um those are, even though there's so many that like stories of those that I love. And I was talking about this with Camille the other day. It's just the ephemeral nature and the impermanence of those formats. And like I'm equal parts grateful that I got to experience those, but also sad that like perhaps no one else will. And I'm hopeful because I see so many people using Kickstarter and these other things, that even if it's not that specific book, that someone will have that similar experience of finding this indie comic, this artist, this voice, or something that, even in a different format than you're used to, says something that speaks to you.
I'm a sucker for oddly shaped books, in that I will pick one up just because of that. Are you familiar with Echo Lands that Image put out a few years ago?
I don't think
It's
so. No.
J.H. Williams.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I do remember that one.
So
Yeah.
it's a landscape format book. Um, and he does a number of different art styles and has them interact throughout the book. Just a really interesting concept. But I mean, it could have been just blank on the inside. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna pick that up. Uh, and I think he did 6 issues, and I haven't seen it since. So maybe it'll never come back. But just from a conceptual standpoint, I always just appreciated somebody doing something weird like that. So uh, with Planet Comics, I'm not quite sure why I did magazine size and not just like Golden Age, but I did. I did, and it's one of the things that I enjoy about it, even though it's sometimes a little bit difficult to store. I mean, they make magazine size boxes and things like that, so um, you're not out in the cold or anything like that. But just in
And you had the
general,
Little Black Terror book that you did.
I tend to like little, smaller, oddly shaped comics than bigger ones, but I wanted to go big with Planet Comics too. One of the things about the smaller size with like Black Terror, that's about half. If you would cut it horizontally, is that when I would pay the artist to draw a page, then I would cut that in half, and it would become 2 pages. So it filled up more space too. So that's also kind of a more budget friendly option for uh, aspiring publishers out there.
Well, we've reached 9:30, and we've managed to fill it up with some information and some noise, I think.
Sure. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going as long as we can. And once just 24 hours, we're doing a marathon. And
Oh.
if Planet Comics doesn't get funded, I'll die on camera.
We don't want that. No one
Let me
wants
check.
that.
Let me check. I haven't done it in 2 hours. How's Planet Comics Book 6 doing? Here it comes. We've hit 2,700 out of a goal of 3,000. So it's really, I'm grateful for that for sure. It's the most and I know a lot of it has to do with the tick for sure, but the most I've got on the first day of a campaign ever. So thanks for the support, and thanks for the signal, Ian.
Yeah, and I'll continue to share little bits. Like we'll post up the artwork, and we'll do our best to get the word out. And thanks for coming and hanging out and sharing all your knowledge and swapping some stories. And I hope people enjoyed the look behind. And we'll check the link if they haven't already. It's in the description. It's in the chat. And Planet Comics #6, guest starring the Tick. Check it
There
out.
are other stories. It's not just the tick, and I don't want to downplay some of the great creators who are doing some of the other stories too. Certainly, it's a real. I mean, it's a privilege, but it's really wonderful for me to get to use the character in this book too. So thanks to Ben Edlund for giving me the shrug of the shoulders and the okay for putting this in.
If he sees this, thank you, Ben, and everybody. I hope to see you. See you.